So
Mhm.
what are the most common CMC compliance pitfalls you've seen in the CDMO partnership, and how do you avoid them?
Well, I think the most common pitfalls the difficulties we run into with CMC, with most CDMOs, is this schizophrenia between commercial and development. And I call it schizophrenia because, let's be honest, the CDMO's revenue and their business model is built around commercial. Development is nice because it's built around it doesn't matter if you're successful or failure. Barring gross negligence, they get paid either way. But from a volume of revenue, it's mostly commercial. So at the end of the day, somewhat in development, you are hamstrung by those policies and procedures which have been put in place to protect the commercial processes. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're doing a small molecule and you're doing process development, and I'm doing my blending, and now I want to do blend uniformity to demonstrate that I've defined a control space that is defensible and can be substantiated there. I've run into CDMOs that will not allow you to dispense that material out of that blender until the lab releases it, which could be 2, 3 weeks where that material sits there in that blender waiting for an analytical result back on whether the product passed bulk uniformity. So if you haven't had this conversation with them before you started your study, you're in for a lengthy delay in your overall cycle time for doing your studies here. So making sure there's real clarity on how you're going to handle the likely eventualities of CMC, which are going to be the processing studies, protocol generation, execution, data analysis, your access to that data. You want to get that clarified right up front. Number two, how are you going to handle laboratory inspection, LIR1s and LIR2, laboratory investigations? Because if you're developing a new dissolution method for a small molecule, for example, you're likely going to have some analytical issues as your analysts get comfortable with that method. Microbiological as well with that. So you better have some clarity as to when and how you can interact with them early on so that you can push your program along. Do you get access to your data at the end of your studies? So more and more and more, what we do today is data driven. The fastest way for us to compress the timeline is to get access to our data as quickly as possible. Many CDMOs say we don't want to release the data to you until our quality group has QC'd it on that. And so if you could have an understanding that says, we understand this data you're going to release to us is preliminary, but we would still like to see it. And so if that's not been negotiated up front, then you're sitting around for 4 to 6 weeks waiting for your analytical results to come back. And if there's a deviation around that, potentially longer as you move into investigation. So you find that if you haven't discussed the clarity around the execution portion with the CDMO as to what you need as a drug sponsor to be able to effectively analyze your studies, to understand where you are in your development, to move quickly forward, you are likely going to run into a loggerhead in which you need something that they cannot and will not provide to you because it's not been discussed. So that's probably the biggest issue that we see recurrent. It doesn't matter what the modality is. It's just because of the nature of the two different business models there. They're supporting commercial as their primary revenue. You're doing development there. It doesn't mean they're not participating and keenly interested in your success. It's just that the systems are built around commercial. So having that clarity up front is going to really allow you to be able to make sure you're not going to get any unexpected CMC roadblocks downstream.